It's more painful, in my opinion,
Yeah.
to have awareness and not act on it is more painful than ignorance. Not our fault, as in the odds are stacked against us, but
Is our
it
responsibility.
is our responsibility. Are you the person you say you are behind closed doors? You know, real change takes real work. And actually it's all about action. It's all about action. Like, nothing changes if nothing changes. The work is never finished, but that doesn't excuse you from it. Your gift isn't the thing that you do, it's the energy through which you do the thing you do. I used to roll my eyes at people that say I can't meditate. And actually I go, of course you fucking can't meditate, because your nervous system is just completely in overwhelm.
What do you do now?
I go, here's some breathwork.
Jeremy Clements, the Ref Space. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, mate. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here. Very happy to be back in the chair.
Last conversation was what? End of 2022. It came out January 2023.
Yeah.
And we were both in very different places then.
Very.
Every person I speak to about Jamie, about this, yeah, he's busy. You even say you're busy. And I'd love to start there. Of like, why are you so busy?
Why so busy? Yeah, that's the better question, I think, than what are you doing with the busyness? I think as I know a lot of people in modern times are trying to move away from, I think, that answer. You know, busy but good busy is I think normally.
Do we kid ourselves? Do we think?
Yeah, I think there's been like almost like a post-lockdown reinvigoration of busyness beyond what we deemed as busy before. It's actually now, I feel a lot of people filling their time to the absolute maximum. I think actually the flexibility of things has allowed us to fill our days even more, and the fluidity, I certainly see it, I think, in my transition from, I guess, full-time employment to self-employment, actually how a lack of structure, an increase in freedom and flexibility can lead to almost a dissolution of boundaries.
Which is more busy.
Which is
kind of chaotic.
Yeah.
I resonate.
A quote I heard a few weeks ago, actually, that so simple is like, don't trade in your 9 to 5 for a 24/7.
I love that a couple of minutes in we're all doing quotes.
Yeah. you know me.
Did you find that book, by the way? Because you mentioned that in the last podcast.
Which
you
one?
You used to have a book of quotes.
I never found it. No,
I'd love you
never
to
found it. I now have a Notion list of quotes on my laptop.
But it's like poetry, really, isn't it? It's like someone's creativity. You see a poem and you see like that kind of art behind it. But that's the same with the quote. It says so much.
It's the magic of like the distillation of human nature, human experience into something, you know, pithy and catchy and engaging.
So it was the 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Say that again. So what was that quote?
Don't trade your 9 to 5 for a 24/7. So to actually, instead of avoiding your question, answering the question of why so busy. Two things, I think. One that feels comfortable and one that feels uncomfortable. The comfort comes in knowing that I'm doing what I love. I now, after a bit of a recalibration, am back where I think I started with this work, in terms of my number one priority is impact and supporting people and being of service, and really just supporting people and hoping, you know, as we all do, sort of somewhat vainly and optimistically to change the world in some way through supporting people and giving people a different lens on their own reality. And the less comfortable piece of that answer, I think, is a legacy of my own patterns around wanting to prove myself, wanting to prove my worth, my value by achievement and production and output. And oh God, yeah, in a different form, in a healthier form. I think often these like long-standing, repeating unconscious patterns, we become aware of them and we can transform them and transmute them into a healthier form. Whether there's a space where that dissipates entirely, I actually don't know. And I think whether it's an excuse or whether it's a valid hesitation, I want to be creating things. The same part of me that busies myself, perhaps sometimes out of a desire to avoid stillness and avoid discomfort and avoid being with myself, is the same part of me that is creative and expressive and builds things and has impact. And so it's the light and the dark of the same pattern. It's driven from the same place, and there's a great bit of it and there's a challenging bit of it. And it's actually about making peace with that duality, I think.
Yeah, the external is very similar, but it's like the internal, where's it coming from?
Yeah.
What's the why? And what's driving, what's the motivation behind it? What's sustainable and what's not? So what do you do when you notice that I'm kind of leaning more into doing this to get validation or to be liked, be loved?
Yeah.
When it leans into that, like what's your
The
kind
barometer.
of little trick? Yeah.
So I think the growth and the process of this is catching it sooner and almost putting preventative measures in place rather than reactive measures. And so for me, in the last 6 to 12 months, it's been about getting really clear on the vision and the purpose, and actually understanding why am I doing what I'm doing, because there's an abundance of opportunities, there's an abundance of things I could do and can do, and I can find a reason to say yes to all of those. Some valid reasons, some slightly less valid reasons, but I can always find a reason to do it because it's impact, because it might get me validation. Both sides of that can factor in again. And that has helped massively, just clarity on why I do what I do and where I'm heading, where I want to go. And when I don't catch myself in it, and when I find myself going on sort of that autopilot into old patterns, I find myself in this very narrow field of view. It's almost like I've got blinkers on that are keeping me in this very tight kind of focus, and not a healthy kind of focus where I'm really just like dialed in, more a sense of disconnect from myself, from my spirituality, from any concept of like a bigger purpose. It's all just what is happening in the here and now, and it feels very like two-dimensional. And that to me is where I struggle and suffer, because everything's a fight, everything's a grind. It's all like the admin and in the details, and nothing's flowing. And so in those moments, it's about finding ways to reconnect to spirituality, reconnect to community, to have conversations that really actually make me reappreciate that this is all much, much bigger than what is going on in front of my kind of my eyes. I think for me, one of my, I guess, go-tos in the context of connecting back to spirituality is through experiences and altered states of consciousness, be that through something like music, or be that through something like, Jamie Wheel, who I love, always talks about music, mountains, and mushrooms. So it's kind of just these ways that we reconnect to ourselves through awe and wonder, through expanded states of existing in the world that remind us of something more than the 6 inches in front of our face.
So how do we go from altered states to altered traits?
It's the best. Integration is the simple answer.
Sure.
And I can sit here and probably recite, or at least poorly rehash, a lot of Jamie's ideas.
Have you reached out to him?
So I'm actually looking at going on one of his sort of immersive experiences later in the year.
So when Stealing Fire came out, I read that, and that was kind of the first time I caught wind of them. And Stephen Kotler, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing now, but it seemed to be that they were going into huge companies and just with this model framework and like getting insane results.
Yeah. They're both fascinating. I know that they've gone in their separate ways. The thing that I love and really resonate with Jamie Wheel is his ability to marry up at a very, I think it's slightly reductionist way to describe it, but science and spirituality is deeply rooted in logic and reason and reality, whilst having this beautiful, nuanced understanding of and way of communicating his spirituality, how the world works, human nature, human behavior, and that's something that matters to me, something that I seek to kind of express as well, because I am still someone who is, I think, more naturally attuned to the world of logic and the three-dimensional piece. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Our last conversation, I remember you speaking to like the feminine parts of you, and you were very in touch with that as well, around expression. It comes quite natural to you. But that's what I get. That's what I get. I do get these sides. I get quite a balanced person sat in front of me. Like I really do. And a big part of your work is like bringing that into spaces where people can then access more of themselves to kind of like get your message, which really for me is about the whole integration piece. It's how like you don't just go from the experience, but it's like I hear you speak to that a lot. It's like how you make this a really like lifestyle point of view.
I think this is the thing, and this is probably, you know, I speak very much to my personal experience, but also, and I really appreciate you reflecting that back to me, because I often wonder what people receive kind of from my work and the message that, obviously I know what I think my message is, but to kind of have it reflected back is really valuable. And one thing I'm pondering a lot at the moment is this challenge that we all face of how to be in the world, how to actually know what we know, experience what we experience, understand what is healthy for us, and then step back outside into the way the world works and see all of the holes and all of the things that are consciously or unconsciously keeping us stuck in pain and in suffering. And that cognitive dissonance that I see in my own life, that I see in people I work with, where we know what we should be doing, we know what would be good for us, and yet we keep doing things that we probably know, consciously or otherwise, aren't good for us. You know, we're the disconnect from nature, the disconnect from spirituality, the disconnect from community, from real food, from, you know, all of these things that now fall into this kind of modern industrial wellness complex of like wellness capitalism, and is like this new wave movement, but is actually just about, can you connect back to being a fucking human being? And that's something that I try and integrate into my work, is actually a bit of a reality check of like, we can have this blue sky thinking, idealistic, perfect image of, well, if we just go back to how things were before, if we just move to the commune and, you know, create our own space and our own land and do it that way, then everything will be fine. But you still have to be in the world.
It's actually harder to be around people than people think sometimes.
100%.
If you're not being truthful and honest and in your integrity, because you can't hide.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people, it's easy to hide now. It's easy to go home, have all your shadows kind of in the dark, and not let other people see that. And that's kind of easy. It's convenient, really.
Yeah. And so it's something I, you know, again, was thinking last night about this conversation. It's something I admire about you, probably above most of the things I admire about you, is your integrity and your capacity to know who you are and live as that. And I think integrity for me is being the person you say you are when there's no one around to view it. Are you the person you say you are behind closed doors? Probably not most of the time. I don't know. Sometimes
I'm really trying to be. That is my like goal and intention, but it's not easy, as I just pointed out. But that's how I want to live, and that's really what I look at.
Me too. I think it's hard, and I think this is the challenge. And you know, we think about the problems in the world at the moment in terms of physical health, in terms of mental, emotional health, spiritual health. We're all struggling. I don't, the odds, this is the thing, it's easy to go,
Yeah.
we should be doing better as individuals, and it's very easy to turn the blame on the individual, when actually the odds are massively stacked against us. We're in
Yeah.
a position in society, particularly in cities, particularly, you know, certainly in the world that we operate in here, where it's really bloody hard to get over that cognitive dissonance and live in a way that is aligned with how you want to live your life, because actually it's cheaper, it's more affordable, it's more convenient to live in a way that we're being pushed towards.
Yeah,
it's like we're being
less
funneled.
risks.
Yeah, the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
It's like we're moving that way at this exponential speed and then going, why do I still feel like shit?
Yeah.
And this is where I think you couple that with, I think, the other side of convenience culture, which is that we now have more time on our hands than ever to look inwards. We have increased time to like navel gaze and go, who am I and why am I struggling? What are my patterns? And we can get to a place where we feel like we know what we want to do. We know what we want from life. I know actually what the right path is. And then the other side of the convenience piece is we're being funneled towards the exact opposite of that. And so we get this almost like splintering of self, where we know what's right, but we're being pushed in the opposite direction.
Well, awareness without action is freeze, right?
Exactly. It's more painful, in my opinion,
Yeah.
to have awareness and not act on it is more painful than ignorance, often, because now you see so clearly all of the issues.
Yeah.
And then you go, I'll just crack on. And I think, to come back to, I guess, the point around my work, I talk all the time, like I bore myself sometimes with it, but like the message time and time again is, how can we support people coming off of autopilot? Because it's easier, more convenient, the path of least resistance, to stay on autopilot. But autopilot is taking us that way, when in fact we know that we want to go that way.
Perfect image of that is 2 escalators left and right, stairs in the middle. And there's one guy or girl goes through the stairs.
Yeah.
And yeah, like what's healthier? What's more, what's going to fulfill you when you reach that? And this is an analogy. It's not as simple as walking some stairs, but like reaching to the top of those stairs when you've worked for it. And then you're looking back, okay, everyone else is taking the escalator.
Yeah. It reminds me of the analogies that, and kind of the metaphors that people throw out around psychedelics as well. It's kind of that teleportation up to the top of the stairs.
Sure.
And then you find yourself back at the bottom of the stairs again 5-7 hours later, and you wonder why nothing's changed. And it's just because actually you've still got to climb the stairs, you've still got to climb the mountain, and that's, you know, real change takes real work. And I think we underestimate that, and because we're quite, particularly Western world, very cognitive biased, intellectual biased, we think that understanding is enough. And actually, it's all about action. It's all about action. Like, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I think we sometimes expect, just by having an intellectual understanding, and I still fall into this because I am that way inclined. I go, yeah, well, I know the pattern. So isn't that enough? Surely that's enough. And it's not.
Do you think it's really hard for us to comprehend that if you're not getting your physical, social, emotional needs met as a human, then you're a human in suffering?
I think so.
Ultimately.
I do think so. I think there's a friend of mine who works in the same space, and we've collaborated on some projects, and he first presented this model to me. I don't think he'd claim the model as his own, but sort of these 3 layers of nervous system healing, nervous system regulation, top down, bottom up, outside in. So top down being the intellectual piece. So parts work, shadow work, talk therapy, all of the good stuff. Bottom up being somatics, the breath, the body, working with movement. And then outside in, which is environment design. Where do you live? How do you live? Who do you live with? And I think we're, in society, very, if you had to rank those in the order that we pay attention to them, top down comes first. You know, psychotherapy is, you know, it's the thing.
Yeah.
Then we're seeing this wave, almost like a new wave of bottom-up interventions, breathwork, somatics, nervous system healing. And I don't think we're doing enough here. Like, I think about, again, coming back to this point of like how to be in the world, how to actually exist and operate in the world. And actually the times where I come away suddenly feeling good, suddenly feeling great, it aren't because I've sat down and done a practice. They're because I've gone and engaged in a social setting, in a place I feel safe and comfortable and seen, perhaps doing an activity, using my body, you know, something physical. And then afterwards, my mind is clear. I feel energized. I feel connected to myself, connected to others. And actually, again, it comes back to taking action. That's a doing thing. That's not a self-inquiry thing. That's actually, and obviously the self-inquiry is important to go, okay, what to do to actually guide the doing. But self-inquiry without action, to me, isn't enough for people. I don't think it does what it needs to do.
So how are you getting results then with your business? If you put that in like the entrepreneurial hat that you've had on for many years now, how are you seeing results, best results, and navigating those challenges? Belief will come into this, what you believe is possible, and how your mindset, which is a real, it's a word to really encapsulate, I think, how you face challenges and that kind of, way into life, which is how your mind is set and how it meets challenge, how it meets discomfort. And you could talk about all those elements in that way, I guess, because it is, for me, yes, top down, but we are very aware as we can be conscious as animals. And that is our biggest gift, because you can see anything in a way that's suffering or see anything in a way that's an opportunity for growth. So like, how have you been navigating those things, and what have you seen work the most? Like getting a team, anything like even tangible like that, like the accountability piece you mentioned. Yeah,
I think having an external set of eyes, I very recently started working with a coach / mentor again. And every time I sit there, and he won't know this, and he may never hear this, but I'll probably let him know. I probably spend the first half of those conversations going, why am I doing this? Like, this is giving me nothing. And come the end of the session, I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Like, this has provided me with clarity that I would not have been able to get on my own. And I think that, for me, is very much a personal piece, but I know for others as well, helps a huge amount just to be able to bounce, especially as an solo business owner and entrepreneur, to be able to have someone else's opinion, but also just have someone else's steer and guidance to think about things in a different way, and lead you to confront things that, you know, your mind perhaps wouldn't even allow you to go there on your own. So I think that's definitely a really valuable piece.
When you're in that, why am I doing this? Is it related to time and money?
I think I am aware in myself of my, let's call them trust issues. I love people. I think people are amazing, and I have so many wise people in my world who I know are incredibly intelligent and successful and smart, and yet,
why don't you trust me?
That's a different episode. And yet I sometimes struggle to value other people's opinions on something that I know better than them.
You think you know?
How would someone, you know, there's an arrogance in it. How would this person,
there's awareness in it,
that I've met twice, have anything of value to say about my business that I've been working on for 5 years? That's the narrative that can show up. Okay. And so I think I can be very, stubborn in a way, and go, you know, why am I doing this? Like, things are working fine. Things are fine. And I'm very aware that way of thinking, of just, you know, I know best, is a surefire way to hit the glass ceiling of what I believe I'm capable of, which may not be actually what I'm capable of. And I certainly feel that probably the thing that I confront the most in my work is this, I guess, legacy inferiority complex where I'd say it's the butting of heads of this inherent belief that I'm capable of more and this inherent belief that I'm a total piece of shit that's capable of absolutely nothing. And so I find myself going, why am I not satisfied? Why do I want to do more? Why am I busy? To come back to the first question. And it is because, and it's, it's a self-esteem piece, it's a confidence piece, it's whatever it might be. I do want and believe that there's more that I have to give. And yet the fear stops me from going there. And so to actually have someone even just lend a perspective on, this coach that I was working with the other day, just to reflect back to me actually everything that I have done already from an external perspective, because my internal lens is obviously different to the external lens, like we were talking about before we came on air. Would you say it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle? That is a big part of it. I think I'm stuck inside my own bottle, expecting it.
I love that. I love that you've touched upon that as like the first thing that's really helped, because that in that example you've identified something that we can all do, and what probably we're witnessing en masse in the world is like, let's look at the boss of some sort of organization. Has he got that in place? Because we don't know what we don't know, and like the wise person will have the acknowledgement that they don't know certain things, or that it's really important to check your own bias in whatever it is. Things are fine, that they're good as they are, but they never stay the same. And that's the wisdom to know that they don't, and to surrender to them changing, but also to just have that kind of in place.
And it's the confronting nature of, and this is when I feel my most wise and most connected to myself, is when I'm comfortably able to hold two apparently conflicting truths. So I don't know everything, but I do know a hell of a lot. And it's like that balance of going, it triggers the inferiority complex in me to have to, it's almost like I feel in accepting that I don't have all the answers, that's going to make this side of things crumble to the ground. If I admit that I don't have all the answers, then all of a sudden the other side just disappears. And the fact of the matter is it never does. Leaning into that vulnerability is what makes leaders great. I think there's a skill to it, to maintain the strength within the vulnerability. But I think anyone can muscle their way into being a leader. But they will only get so far if you can't, listen to the opinions of others.
It's hard to hold those two truths, right? I think they're the best space holders. They are leading, but open to questions and open to also being wrong. I really do my best to embody that and like really speak to that when I am leading myself, but asking people to come along for the ride. Like the invitation's always there, but the invitation, it's not an order. And I just think those people, which I see in you, it's hard to. Well, let's talk about the skill then. Like, how do you develop that skill?
It's a soft skill, right? It's certainly not a online course in leadership piece. I think I remember speaking to Africa Brooke, and I just heard her speak. It was the first time we'd met, and someone had asked her, what is your gift? What is the gift that you give to the world? And she gave a beautiful answer, and all I could think in what I see in her that really resonates with me, which I shared with her after, was to be someone that is so comfortable in their own skin that it inspires and gives permission to others to do the same. So can you be, and this is something I see in you as well, someone that is very much at ease as themselves. There's no mask, there's no pretense, and there's an inner confidence, there's a comfort that actually, without them having to do anything actively, just by existing, speaking, communicating, they make you go, okay, it's okay for me to be me. And I think that is the skill, is actually self-acceptance, total self-acceptance for the flaws, for the shadow, for the blind spots. Actually, an acceptance of blind spots to me is a part of it too, right? Is going, there will still be things that I don't know. There will still be things that I'm not aware of that somebody else has probably spotted in me, and maybe they judge me for. That's okay.
I love that. It reminds me of the world is perfect as it is, even my will to change it.
Yeah.
So it's like accepting the paradigm of like the blind spots, like they're there as well.
Yeah. I think it's that old piece around self-acceptance doesn't mean complacency. And I think that's where a lot of people get worried. You know, the alphas, the alphas get worried at that point, because they're like, yeah, but what about the grit? What about the growth? What about being better? And I'm like, be better, but do it from a place of self-love rather than self-loathing. Do it from a place of, you know, compassion for others and self-acceptance, and go, I am accepting of my flaws, and I can still wish to move forwards. What's the quote I heard the other day? We're
going to put up a little ding.
Yeah.
So you get one, I get one, you go.
The work is never finished, but that doesn't excuse you from it. It's not the right quote, but the message is right.
Yeah.
It's never done. And that would be easy to go, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point in doing it then if it's never finished? And I think a lot of what our intellectual understanding of self-development, and certainly what, you know, to talk about wellness capitalism again, what the narrative will be marketing-wise is this emphasis on, you are a puzzle to be solved, the problem to be fixed, buy my course. And people go, okay, when actually it's, you buy the course to develop yourself completely at ease in the understanding that there will be a next problem or a next evolution or a next pain or a next suffering. It's like we're trying to heal ourselves out of suffering and into the certainty, you know, this duality of the brain and human nature of desperately clinging to certainty in amongst the inevitability of uncertainty. And I think that's where that to me is almost the seat of suffering, is actually we go, the brain wants certainty in a world that will never grant it that. And so you can either surrender or you can cling, and both have their flaws and their faults. But I'd rather be kind of going with the tide than swimming upstream.
Goenka said it best. It's like craving, aversion, and attachment. Those three things. You really want something, you're trying to move away from it, or you're really attached to it. This is suffering, that's it. Yeah. So how does this relate to the nervous system? Do you know what I mean? Even your example of that, battling with those two, and like being in someone's company who's like, oh, they're really in their heart. They're leading from that place. Then they're practicing all these things. They're not attached, but then they're also radical acceptance. But also, this is what I'm doing about certain things. So how does that relate to us as the observer of what it does to our nervous system as maybe a gateway in? But I'd love to open up this section on the nervous system. It's one of the biggest things I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah. Because it does relate to everything. And I was thinking the other day, listening to Irene Lyon. Did I send you her? But she was talking about sympathetic, parasympathetic, but like the different tones of the nervous system, and how I was then thinking, it doesn't really matter to me what category they're in. What do I need to understand and do about it? Again, it's like action. I've got this information, whether it's high tone, low tone, it can help. But also, what do I then implement? How do I notice what's the symptoms?
Yeah, it brings me back to, I guess, the whole conversation around this like intellectualization. It's like the map is helpful,
not the territory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the understanding, it'd be easy to sit here and just sort of say it doesn't matter to what state you're in, but it does. And it's the same where I can start talking about wearable technology and going, we shouldn't need it, but actually it's helpful for a lot of people with complete disconnect from their body and then their internal state, for them to start reconnecting to that and having a bit of a map and being able to go, I feel like shit. Oh, it's because I slept like shit and my HRV is low. And they go, okay, cool, that's what that feels like. And then you get to a point where I would hope most people can set the tech aside and work with their internal kind of compass. So if we think about the nervous system and we think about, I guess, more of the technicalities of this conversation and the intellectual understanding, I very much view the nervous system as the lens through which we view the world and experience the world. That's ultimately what it is. It's the pair of glasses that you're wearing to experience the world around you. The autonomic nervous system, where the breath lives, all of these kind of automatic functions.
We said breath.
Yeah, second time I said it as well. To the sort of most fundamental understanding of that is what you spoke to there, the two branches, sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic being fight, flight, parasympathetic, rest, digest. Stephen Porges, you come across Stephen Porges? So he developed something called polyvagal theory, which is, where a lot of Irene's work would
dense
draw from.
book?
Yeah, I've got the brief version and it's still dense. So it's almost like if you try and condense.
She was talking about how people miss where freeze is on that spectrum.
Yeah. So polyvagal theory would speak to three states within the nervous system. We have, let's start with the good. We'll start ventral vagal.
Ooh,
so
good,
this
you
is
said good.
Yeah, it's loaded. But let's start with ventral vagal, which is us connected to self and the world around us. It's being at ease in the world. So this is our state of calm, of connection, of social engagement. Arguably where we want to sit as our sort of default. We then have the sympathetic state, fight, flight. So this is our mobilization response, our activation response, where we're ready to either fight or flee. And there'll be times, in our day where we want to be in activation. There'll be a certain amount of sympathetic activation running through our systems now to actually be in this conversation and be activated to do so. And then there is dorsal vagal, which is shut down. This is freeze. The idea really is that we have in the middle here, this is model developed by a guy called Dan Siegel, the window of tolerance, which is sort of our ventral vagal. We're in there, we're ticking up and down. There's a bit of activation, there's a bit of kind of de-escalation. And then we have above it hyperarousal, and we have below it hypoarousal. And so if you think of this fight flight as mobilization, hypoarousal is immobilization, the shutdown. And this will help us dictate how to work with our nervous system. And this, I guess, comes back to the action piece. So the understanding comes first, and then the action piece comes off of the back of that. And so what I think the challenge here is that with this wave of, as I said, kind of bottom-up modalities, but also just nervous system regulation as a bit of a topic that's in the ether at the moment. It's a big one. The basic kind of understanding of sympathetic, parasympathetic has led us to oversimplify it and go, well, we demonize stress, we demonize the sympathetic response, the activation response, and as such, the route out of that is what we call downregulation. So how do we downregulate sympathetic arousal to bring you back into parasympathetic? When in actual fact, a lot of what people are experiencing in the world right now is hypoarousal, freeze, functional freeze, shutdown, and real procrastination, not procrastination in the very mundane sense of not doing the piece of work you want to do. Maybe that's a manifestation of it, but actually just feeling numb and dull and depressed It's, you know, that's where depression lives, is in that immobilization response. And the route through that is certainly not down regulation. It's not slow conscious breathing. And I think a lot of people, and I'm almost certain that I've done this unintentionally at early points in my career, I go, you're stressed, you're in freeze because you're stressed. So how can we down regulate that stress? And people will go, I'm struggling to get out of bed. So that's not going to be the answer, is to take energy down, take you even into a lower energy state. And so that is, I think, the understanding piece, is going, okay, helping people first and foremost connect to their bodies, because we are so wildly disembodied that we're living completely here with no understanding of the sensations, some people not even feeling the sensations. So how could you possibly know what your current state is? So connect to the body, build this interoceptive capacity to feel those sensations, and then interpret those sensations and understand what your individual markers of sympathetic are and what your individual markers of shutdown and dorsal are. And from there, take action accordingly and appropriately. So at a basic kind of fundamental level, we'd come back to those three kind of lanes: top down, bottom up, outside in. Outside in is important and key here. I think we underestimate a little bit, like I spoke to, kind of that social engagement, that being in the world, that moving my body, that all of that piece. I think setting up a healthy home environment as well for that, morning sunlight, grounding, you know, all of these things, biohacking, and creating an environment that supports regulation and organization in the nervous system. But then also using techniques to bring you either out of that dorsal shutdown or out of that sympathetic overdrive. And so I think that's, I guess, the map. And then there's the action piece that comes off of that.
So let's dive into functional freeze.
Yeah.
Because if we're observing our culture, firstly, why do you think everyone's there? And we can talk about childhood.
Yeah.
You know, who's really getting their needs met in that area of their life. But I think functional freeze, the why, but then also how to notice when you are.
The why is, I think it runs deep. I think it brings me back to some of the things we've already touched upon in terms of convenience, path of least resistance, where we don't have to, you know, it's convenience over challenge. It's, you know, distraction over discipline. It's kind of all of these things where...
That'd be the nice guy syndrome, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Symptoms there.
Autopilot, nice guy, people please, self-abandon, run on autopilot, do as you're told. You know, we're not living, and we wonder why.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, couple that with constant, overwhelming overstimulation. Constant. Quite often...
Yeah.
And this is, again, it's a slight simplification, but quite often if we head way up into sympathetic, they'll reach a tipping point where we just shut down. And for quite a lot of people, that, I think, is a manifestation of the why here as well, is prolonged, consistent overstimulation, noise, tech, you know, everything that is pushing us and pushing us and pushing us with no respite. We, as a society, cannot sit still. We cannot. The number of times I used to roll my eyes at people that say I can't meditate, and actually I go, of course you fucking can't meditate, because your nervous system is just completely in overwhelm.
What do you do now?
I go, here's some breathwork. I do, you know, at a very fundamental level. That's why I believe in breathwork as a tool, because it's an active protocol to help regulate the nervous system into a state where stillness might feel achievable. And so it's like breathe your way into a state where you could meditate and get something from it. So then I guess the layer deeper would be, you know, childhood trauma, safety. We're all craving this, ultimately, this sense of safety. That's what that ventral vagal state is. It's social and safe. And we don't feel safe. Many of us, whether that's past trauma,
with
present
our family,
trauma,
with our friends, at work.
Yeah. I think that the sort of individualism, the like hyper individualistic nature of our society, you know, we're, as people always say, more connected than ever and more disconnected than ever. Loneliness is something I have battled with and do battle with.
Yeah.
I think it's a legacy of my upbringing. I think it's a legacy of phone addiction throughout my life. You know, sometimes more comfortable interacting online than in person, feeling more comfortable being vulnerable online than in person, and almost we hide behind the screen as a way to connect. And I think that is going to spike fear. That loneliness, that kind of feeling of disconnection is going to keep ticking us into a resting state of unease, a resting state of just not quite feeling like I can just settle and be still. And that puts us into this freeze state, puts us into this shutdown, this numbness.
I remember when I used to work in events a lot, so it's pretty full on. We'd work all week, and so I moved to London for a good year, 2 years, and the weekend would come, and if I was in London and the sun was out, I'd get so anxious. And I think this was related to that, because at work I had a sense of belonging or purpose, let's say, and we can segue this into the meaning that we're all craving also, or lacking. But like, I had this sense, and I have to really tune back to it, because I forget what it was like. And the weekend would come, and I've had a free schedule. And I'd be riddled with anxiety. And I think my nervous system was so like alarmed at like, where are my friends? What do I do? How do I spend this time? Like, it was just like time's running out, falling through my hands. Like, what? And it was related to this kind of like shock of just space, stillness. Go and be. I can't. And it makes so much sense, like, from that kind of framework.
Yeah. And just this inability to be with ourselves. I think that's the biggest thing I see. And it's, again, not our fault, as in the odds are stacked against us, but it is our responsibility. It really, like, in its purest form, you can either sit there and go, woe is me, or you can do something about it. And I think that's it's the acceptance, but the kind of progress and lack of complacency is actually do something different. Like, if you want things to be different, do something different. But our biology, it's almost like we're working against our biology at this point, because the environment that we're in 9 times out of 10 is pushing us on that escalator. It's taking us down the path of least resistance, and our biology likes the path of least resistance on a very kind of, I think...
Wired.
We are wired. I think the human brain, I'm not talking necessarily from a position of being a neuroscientist here, but my sense is that we are wired in such a way that instant gratification is easily accessible and easily followed. And actually you have to try with intention, consciously, to engage in more delayed gratification and that sort of disciplined approach to moving forward. And so if you allow yourself to accidentally or otherwise fall back onto autopilot, then you're going to get dragged back into that stream. And then you look around going, oh, I'm drowning again. And then you bring yourself back out. You dry yourself off, and then you might fall back in. And it's just that we are up against it. I think that's where I'm like, cut yourself some slack, but pull yourself together. Like, that's, again, 2 truths. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility.
Is that your quote? Yeah. I'm going to quote you from now on. Yes, absolutely. It's such a powerful point of view to take. It really is. Okay, so functional freeze, there's a whole gamut of why there. I think we get that now.
Yeah.
So then, and I also feel like within that we do get like how to notice it. Like how, for example, I've just given like, does anxiety creep in when you've got a free schedule? It's like, what did you say about, you were quoting the safety and its dysregulation related to being in meditation? What was like, what was the quote? That you, to a nervous system, it's going to feel...
Rest will always feel like a risk to a nervous system that's used to chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's kind of the add-on, which is, and a mind that believes its value is defined by what it achieves. So it's the familiarity of the chaos, which is our default now. And so your nervous system will crave the familiar. Yeah. It will go looking for it, because that's where it's almost like we've established a new comfort zone. And that comfort zone is chaos. And actually the stillness, the rest, the peace, the contentment, the just being is foreign. And that is now the deepest discomfort.
Yeah, you said something a while back. And you did a post about it, and it was about the unfamiliar. It was like you're wired for the unfamiliar or something.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? You're always seeking that.
Yeah, I think it's something to the effect of your nervous system will crave familiar chaos but heal in unfamiliar safety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that about? It kind of confused me. I was like, crave a familiar chaos. Like it's craving chaos.
Yeah.
I guess it's related to what we're saying, right?
Yeah, it's exactly related.
Yeah.
So it's it's the simplest thing to speak of here is ice baths.
Yeah.
People going, oh, my new self-care thing is ice baths. And they do 5 hit sessions a week. They ran 2 marathons last month. They work 7 till 9 every day. Mm-hmm. They move from the big screen to the medium screen to the small screen on loop.
Yeah.
They're in stress, they're in burnout. And to chill out, they get in an ice bath, which is going to add more stress to their nervous system. And then they wonder why nothing changes. It's because there's an addictive quality to stress. There's an addictive quality in the nervous system to chaos, and it craves that. And actually, the battle is balancing the scales. It's not saying don't do anything of intensity, because that's the other problem, is just complete comfort and not doing anything that challenges you, but not making intentional discomfort your comfort zone, not making the challenge the only thing that you do. There has to be rest and stillness. There has to be yin and yang. There has to be, there has to be balance on those scales. Otherwise we fall into one of the pitfalls of either end.
It must be, I'm really getting an insight as I look through everything now through this lens of the nervous system. And it must be so interesting for you having such a depth of knowledge, but then seeing the world as it is playing out and then relating it to this quite complex but simple understanding of our body and anatomy. So it feels like a mathematician's brain who gets all the calculations and sees everything in such a different way. Is that I don't know? Does that?
It's
is it quite overwhelming at times?
I do find. I enjoy and find pain in being inside of my own head, in the sense of I'm not by any means, some special mind, but I do very much see the world in patterns and in a mathematical kind of equational sense, and that's how I guess build. If I'm working with someone one-on-one, as a very basic example, I'm sort of looking at the equation that's in front of me and then looking at the solution on the other side as to how do we balance those scales. What are the symptoms? What's the cause? What's behind the surface that is presenting as this person and their problems, and how do we pull some of those wires out of the switchboard and plug them into the other ones to balance it, whilst also knowing that, at a very not basic level, but intriguing level and confusing and innately human level, that if I tell this person who's never slowed down in their life that I want them to start slowing down, that's going to cause them a level of pain and discomfort.
Just noticing when I do that and how often I've done that.
So I think I do see things as quite mathematical, whilst also trying to always hold on to this sense that it's all nuanced. It's not black and white. There's no black and white, and so an acceptance of that, I think, is, I guess, the overriding and underlying thing there as well.
Do you think a way in for people could be to notice it in other people first, and then start to pay attention where it's applicable to you?
I think so. I think I see it in my clients quite a lot. They have these aha moments where they're like, oh, that's what I'm doing. And what I find, and obviously I think it makes sense given that these people are actively seeking support, that they're aware that something's not right, but they haven't quite been able to pin down exactly what that is. And that quote of mine, kind of around rest feeling like a risk, went wildly viral. And I had someone a few weeks ago ask me, like, why do you think it did that? And the best answer I can give is that it articulated something that people inherently knew about themselves, but they hadn't been able to articulate yet. And it's sort of holding up that mirror
every
to people.
Quote.
Yeah, exactly, right?
It's
the mirror.
Yeah.
It's the mirror. It's kind of helping people articulate their experience and realize something. And it's taking, I guess, taking the unconscious and making it conscious for people in a simple way.
That's it. Okay, so digestion, maybe sleep, but also what's the other one? Healing, like when you hurt or you have a cold or whatever it might be. How much time it takes to get back to your homeostasis can be a signal that these things are off as well, right? And if you're not digesting food, or like you're getting intolerances, maybe.
I think there's so many manifestations now. I think, like I was talking with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about physical tension, and I always get left side of my neck and left trap locking up when I'm going through a particular time of anxiety, and I'd be like, oh, I must have done something in the gym. I must have pulled it, must have tweaked it. But now I just go, that is a purely mental and emotional thing.
Okay.
And I think that's, I guess, where I, see things for other people as well is it's not all going to be down to that. There will be physiological causes, things like mold that affect people in certain ways. There's a lot of reasons. You could talk about the toxins in products that we use, all of this stuff. But a lot of what we see, especially in terms of mental and emotional pain, has mental and emotional root cause, but then also things like gut issues coming from stress, and there's layers upon layers of cause and effect, I think. So
you say toxins, as I always think about is plastic in my balls.
Yeah. When that came out, it's just,
what do we do with that? It's just
when life gives you plastic in your balls. I don't know.
Stop making babies.
Yes, I don't even know. I think that's where there's a level of you have to maintain a level of humor in these things. Otherwise, you just get sucked into the doom and gloom.
It's true, man. Just make a dark joke and crack on. Yeah, bro. Yeah. Anything else you want to speak to on that kind of overview of the...
I think you almost went there around purpose and meaning.
Sure.
And I think this is an important part of, if we're talking on functional freeze, if we're talking on healing, if we're talking on personal development, I think this is a big part of the puzzle for me is the connect, a little bit like I spoke to in myself, like this connection to meaning and spirit and purpose. And I do feel often when we talk about healing, we talk about the nervous system, we actually, in doing so, again, shrink things down to the very day-to-day. And I actually think healing for me, in how I approach my work with others, in how I approach my work with myself, is both micro and macro. I think there's a piece here of the day-to-day. What are your routines, your rhythms, your practices, your tools? What makes up that micro toolkit that you actually have a lot of control over? And then also, what are you doing to connect to the things that you have very little control over, the forces that are at play,
to which there are more than you can,
and your energy. You know, how do you? What is the macro piece, which is, I think, about the meaning and the purpose and the expansiveness of things. So I had a realization at Christmas time in Wales that it was very much about, in the micro, make decisions, take action, do things. That is what you can control. And then in the macro, take your hands off the reins and actually just allow yourself to be in the flow of things. And for a lot of us, for many different reasons, I think, but also just, again, the odds being stacked against us and our way of being in the world at the moment, we've lost any sense of anything beyond the micro. Everything is blinkered. Everything is, how can I control all of this stuff and move the pieces in the right direction, when actually we need a connection to that bigger picture to keep us going. You know, traditionally that would have been religion, an organized religion for a long time, and that's died a death to a certain extent, certainly in mainstream acclaim. And then it's sort of become New Age spirituality. People are seeking meaning in different forms that all come back to the same place. Yeah. That's why you're seeing a lot of people actually from the New Age coming back to Christianity. And I look at it and I go, of course, because you're just talking about exactly the same thing. Yeah. You know, this conversation about God, right? We all mean the same thing. If we talk about God, if we talk about spirit, if we talk about, you know, the forces at play, it's the same thing under different language. And language in this case is inherently limiting because there's only so many ways you can describe it. But that is, I think, what we're talking about. Faith, belief, a connection to things bigger than myself. Like, I know I need that, even if I can sit there sometimes when I am feeling very restricted and very constricted and go, well, that's all a load of rubbish. How could I possibly believe in that? And that is also a symptom that I need that. I need to connect to that. But there's, you know, stigma, there's, you know, skepticism, there's this very rational, logical part of our society and my brain that wants me to question it. And then I suffer more. And so I think this piece has to, in my opinion, we need to find a way to make purpose and meaning and faith like mainstream again, in a way that it doesn't have to be about your God or my God. It has to be about, like, how do we keep going in the face of inevitable uncertainty and suffering? And that's not going to be done by controlling every last piece of what's in front of you. There has to be a degree of letting go. There has to be a degree of surrender. There has to be a degree of belief. And we're rubbish at that as a society right now. I think we're fractured, separated, divided beyond belief. And I think there are ways that we can address that, but it's a big, like, bulky piece of work for us to get back to that.
Do you see it happening?
Yes and no. Yeah, I think I see it. I tell you what, I see it in every single one of my group sessions. Every single one of them, because people come, and I've never thought about it in these terms. People come because they think they're doing something in the micro. Sure. They're like, I'm going to go to a breathwork session. I'm going to regulate my nervous system. I'm going to work with my subconscious mind. I might even connect with some other people. I don't think a lot of people factor that aspect into a group session. They're like, I'm going for me. And they come for that and they get that. But the bit that they don't plan on getting, and that actually, if I really think about it, I don't plan on giving, is the other bit, the indescribable, the ineffable piece of the puzzle that is the best way I've found to describe the feeling is a reminder of our shared humanity. It's a stripping back of, it doesn't actually matter if you're the corporate guy coming into the space or the guy coming off the commune into the space. That loses any meaning in the space. It actually just, everyone's there going, oh wow, like I forgot. It's a remembering of the bigger piece. And so I think, to answer the question, yes, I do see it happening. But again, we're then up against it. You know, you come into this space, it feels lovely, it's, you know, it's held, it's safe, it's connected, and then you have to go and be in the world again. And I think the world, the way it is right now, chips away at that. It breaks you down. It wants to rob you of your optimism, rob you of your integrity. Faith, integrity, all of it. It wants to strip you of that. And so you come back again. You need the reminder. And that for me is, I suppose, the action piece on the macro level.
Is it symptom relief?
Symptom relief. And this is,
it's the thing. I'm on this conversation, this very thing. I've spent a lot of time leaning into it.
I think it's hard, and I don't. It's come back to what we were saying earlier. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I do what I do consciously because it gives people those micro things, unconsciously in the bit that keeps me moving forward, the bigger picture of going, could this make real change? Is it more than just symptom relief? And I want to believe that it is more than that. And we'll never know. And I think that's it. It's like we just keep moving forward. And I think the thing that gives me hope, and I was thinking about this late last night, Jamie Wheel.
You were in a great mood.
I was in a great mood. Jamie Wheel said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I just kept thinking, we're seeing this psychedelic renaissance, we're seeing this altered states of consciousness for healing renaissance. That happened in the 60s and 70s and got quashed. Were the conditions in a different way very, very similar? Were we post-war suffering, pain, and that was inevitable, that rise of how do we find meaning? And I almost feel like, okay, it's, we're not wearing the same, there are some people wearing similar clothes, but we're in a different society, in a different skin, in a different version of the game. But the feeling and the sense, I don't know. I actually want to speak to some people who were there kind of then and go, was it the same thing? Are we actually just going through the same kind of crisis of meaning? Is this actually zooming out the rhythm? Is this actually just the rhythm? And we're at a point in that curve where it's been really down here and it's starting to inflect back up, and you get groups of people coming together to help move that forward. And is this just inevitable? Is this just how things go? There are the people that fight against it, there are people that fight for it. I'd love to think there is a, utopian reality where everyone realizes that we'd be better off, living in a loving way, love over everything. But is that the unrealistic piece? And actually it's going, we're doing our best with what's in front of us based on the conditions that we find ourselves in. And would there be people doing what we're doing, trying to provide that symptom relief, if there hadn't been the pain that came before? If there were nothing to fight, there's
hard times make hard people.
There's no light without the dark. Is there a reason for?
I think so, just to a large extent.
Yeah.
I think there is that ebb and flow, light and dark, night comes, day comes. Maybe that is the flow. But then there have been epochs of time, the majority of our existence in this anatomical Homo sapien, which we existed, and I never want to romanticize or do the opposite, which is like label just savages, that we were. I think there was a mix. But ultimately, what we define as progress, and we have to move forward, and we have to measure, and we have to go on this linear path, didn't exist for the majority of our existence, actually even like a large section of it. So is that a condition? And I think it really is. I think it's a condition, and it's a bit of a sickness, a disease really, to constantly think in this way of, just resource and profiteering and that kind of vibe. I'm grieving. I feel like I'm at a stage now where I'm starting to grieve. I'm not trying to save something. I went for a big stage of saving. Again, saving. It doesn't really resonate so deeply when I say saving the world, saving the world as I know it. I don't actually want to fight for this world the way I see it and the way I see what I can contribute to. I'm just going to grieve it and then make way for the new and do what I can in every moment. But also, I think it's been quite toxic for me to be such a vocal activist of food that's going to help you, and just very, I guess, small things in the grand scheme. But I think it depends how macro you want to go.
Yeah.
Because if you really want to go macro, it's well, we're not going to be here. The planet is going to continue its cycle, which it is in. And there's going to be things that come in and make way for different things. And that's what I lean into when I think about these conversations. It's also, it helps me kind of just not take it so seriously.
Yeah.
There's a great quote from a great author. It says some things are too serious, some things are too important to take seriously.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, because like ultimately, if I'm in this kind of like pent up energy, really like trying to make change and kind of come from that place, it's like, one, that's not the energy in which to change anything. And two, I'm not like being that I want to see more of. I'm not, I want to be what I want to see.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. It's the concept that came into my head was almost like, am I, you use the word saving. Is it less saving and more, are we just providing palliative care to the inevitable? And I don't know.
That's okay too, right?
Yeah. There's a place for all of it. I think I'd like to believe that, I don't think we'd do what we do unless we believe that change were possible on a bigger scale. I think when I really get into my flow, I'm like, I do. Like I passionately want to make tangible change. Some might argue and debate that tangible change is impacting one person. I think the delusions of grandeur that we can fall into would say it needs to be 1,000 people, it needs to be 10,000 people, it needs to be 1 million people. And I wonder if there is, a turning tide, and I don't think we'll know for a very long time. But it's a hard path because it does feel like you're pushing water kind of up a hill sometimes. And then you get a glimpse of, like I wasn't expecting that politician to do breath work or speak to me about psychedelics. And I'm like, is there something actually under the surface here changing?
I think the same on the micro as well, right?
Yeah.
You make these incremental movements and it just is that. To you, growth is so different to how I see you, because I might check in with you every few months and I'll look at like what's going on online and what you've been doing, and it's like, wow, you're really like moving in such a like you're making leaps. And then for you it's going to be very different because that's all you know, and it's like every moment you're just moving the needle slightly.
Yeah.
And you can't reference the leap really unless you really reflect and look back and then go back. But
I think it's why reflection's important. But also, how important is it? Because actually all you have to do is keep moving forward. And if you stare back for too long, then you lose sight of what's in front of you. But it is important. It's...
I think in every moment, just trying to be a little bit better. Like that's all actually I can do. Andrew Huberman asked Rick Rubin, he was like, so how do you know it's worth it? And he comes back with the most incredible answer of, well, you're judging what's worth it, outcome based. You don't think about the outcome. You just do your best. It's that simple. Yeah. It's just doing your best, showing up, doing your best in every moment, regardless of where it goes. That's it.
That's all it is.
It's so powerful to just like let go of the rest of it, because you actually, it's going to look different to you, to other people. It is that in a nutshell. But it is worth it.
And so what if it's not? I think that's the other side. Like, does it matter? You can choose either to try, or not. And it's either worth it or it's not. And so it's almost like I'd rather try and then it be worth it or not. It's like kind of a decision tree, right?
I think this is what Jim Carrey said about his dad. He said he saw his dad come home from work every day being miserable at a job he actually didn't like. So you could be miserable at doing something you don't want to do. So why don't you go for something you do, at least?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Why not try and change the world on the off chance that you might? Then not try at all, and then you definitely won't.
Yeah.
I think that's, yeah.
You want to change the world? Why not?
Why not? I'm not, maybe I am arrogant enough to believe I can. Maybe I am naive enough to believe I can. Ignorant enough to believe I can. Or maybe I'm justified in believing that if you can impact enough people on an individual level, that is how you do it. It's not about, I'm not storming into...
That's the intention, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not storming into the House of Lords and demanding policy change. But it's if you influence and impact enough people on a very felt level through tools, through experiences, through just, like I shared with Africa, through simply being. It's not actually, your gift isn't the thing that you do, it's the energy through which you do the thing you do. The outcome is of that rather than, giving someone a breathing technique. It's, breathwork for me is, or has been, and is, the gateway into these conversations. And it helps on the micro, and I'm happy to help on the micro, but I'd rather get us talking about the macro and get somebody thinking in a way that supports them to move forward and supports them into that trying and that optimism, realistic optimism, I think, rather than lazy pessimism.
It's one of the first books I ever got, The Rational Optimist.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't just be like an irrational optimist. Be rooted in reality, but be optimistic.
Yeah.
Because that's a way of thinking. Do we need to give people breathing techniques? Oh, you've done that, right? Mate, it's been so fun.
It really has, mate. Yeah, I went in directions that I couldn't have imagined, but probably could have imagined, given the nature of our conversation.
I don't even know where it's going.
Yeah.
But where are you going? Where are you going to be? Like, what's next for you? Are you writing a book, surely? Come on.
I'm thinking about it. I'm certainly thinking about it.
I think that would be...
Yeah, it's something I would love to do. I think it's that, again, it comes back to this balance between this, like, I can sit here very confidently and comfortably in everything I've just said and really believe it, whilst also being like mired by inferiority and imposter syndrome and all of these things. And also what I feel is like rational imposter syndrome, grounded imposter syndrome, going, I'm 30 years old. Who am I to think that I have something to say about the world? Like if there was a 70-year-old looking down on me going,
I know.
Good kid, but a lot to learn.
I relate that in an ancestor's sense, like what my ancestors think of me.
Yeah.
Doing this.
Yeah.
Spending my time.
It's the micro versus the macro again. It's like, to some, I'm someone who has a lot to give and a lot of wisdom and a lot of answers. To somebody else, I'm an enthusiastic kid running about, busying himself. Those two things are equally as true. And that's okay. And I guess that's where I flip between when it comes to thinking about books and things like that.
Whose is that voice?
Which one?
The second.
The second voice.
The enthusiastic kid. Whose is that voice?
What, the doubt or the person?
No, just that perspective. Because neither wrong or right depends on your perspective. But whose is that voice, do you think? If you had to.
I'm not sure, I think it'd be lazy to say my dad. I think it'd be lazy and too easy to say that. I think there's a societal piece. I think there's just like maybe the father, like of, in terms of
paternal.
The boss. It's the boss. It's the manager. It's the hierarchy. It's the voice of hierarchy.
The head
I think
teacher
goes like you're not the CEO yet, so you don't get to have a say. I think it's the ladder that's telling me to not do that. And I think as long as you can hold both the truths of knowing I am just that enthusiastic kid who loves to learn and loves to share, and also that there's so much that I don't know and so many things that other people may disagree with, those two things are okay. But I guess, in terms of where things are heading, my goal, my mission is to sort of continue to encourage and empower people to live with purpose and agency through, I guess, two threads: self-inquiry and expansion and altered states. So breathwork fits into that, but there's a lot more that fits into that. Community, getting people together, conversations, education. I very much love wearing the hat of educator and teacher. There's things that I want to start moving the dial on in terms of working with parents and working with children, and sort of starting them young, I think, is where I'm at in terms of you think about changing the world. I'd like to start people younger, so that they don't have to unlearn all of the things that we've had to unlearn or just starting to unlearn. So I think addressing that meaning piece, helping people connect to meaning, and that macro piece, continuing with the micro, and working with younger people as well is definitely going to be a big part of what comes next. Love so there may be a book in there somewhere, but who cares? There's a lot of books in the world.
Love it. Great, man.
Thank you, man.
And how's your course going? Is it
Yeah,
now?
Breathwork Mastery is happening right now.
Yeah. Is there going to be another option cohort?
Yeah, January next year is going to be the next cohort.
How's it going?
Going really, really well. Yeah, I've got a really amazing group. Loving working with somebody else. Working with James on this has been great for exactly the reason that I enjoy having a coach, because it just gets me outside of my own, vision of the world and version of the world, and different ways of working, collaborating. It's just
we're still perpetuating that model of doing it alone.
Yeah, got to go it alone. Just keep going it alone. Course is going really well. So yeah, next cohort will be early next year, and then just I use the word ticking along, and I think I use it to somewhat kind of keep myself small, but ticking along in the sense that there are the things that we've spoken to here in terms of experiences and tools and techniques and education that is very much like the foundation of my work, and then we can sort of plug bits in on top of that. So retreats, events, experiences, courses, education, conversations, and yeah, that's kind of the lay of the land.
It's great, man. I'm really on your team, and just
thanks, man.
Yeah, admiring, inspiring. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, mate.